There's something eerie happening in marinas across the country right now, and most people walking past don't even notice it. But if you know what to look for, if you understand what you're seeing, it's impossible to miss. Boats sitting in slips, covered in grime and bird droppings, lines fraying, gear deteriorating month after month with no sign of life, no owners showing up, no maintenance being done, no movement at all. These aren't just neglected boats. These are abandoned vessels, ghost boats. And their owners, they didn't just stop coming. They vanished, disappeared without warning, leaving behind assets worth tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, just sitting there rotting. Walk through any marina right now, and you'll see them. Sometimes it's one or two, sometimes it's 5 or 6 in a single marina. And if you talk to the dockmaster, if you get them talking honestly about what's happening, they'll tell you stories that sound impossible. Owners who stopped paying slip fees months ago and can't be reached. Boats that haven't moved in over a year with no explanation. Vessels slowly deteriorating while marina management tries desperately to contact someone, anyone who's responsible. This isn't normal. This has never happened at this scale before. And what it represents, what it tells us about the state of boat ownership and the marine industry is far more disturbing than most people realize. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why boat owners are vanishing, what happens to these ghost boats once they're discovered, who's really paying the price for this epidemic of abandonment, and what it means for the future of recreational boating. But more than that, you're going to see how this phenomenon is the logical endpoint of trends we've been tracking, the final stage of a market collapse that's been building for years. Because people don't just walk away from valuable assets randomly. They don't abandon boats on a whim. What's happening right now is the result of a perfect storm of economic pressure, psychological stress, and systemic problems in the marine industry that have created a situation where abandonment seems like the only option for desperate owners. And once you understand that, once you see the full picture, you'll realize that the ghost boats you're seeing in marinas are just the visible symptoms of a much deeper crisis. One that's going to reshape the entire boating industry, whether we're ready for it or not. I need you to understand something before we go further. What I'm about to tell you isn't pleasant. It's not the kind of content that makes people feel good about boating or ownership or the lifestyle, but it's real. It's happening right now. And if we don't talk about it honestly, if we keep pretending this isn't a crisis, more boat owners are going to find themselves in impossible situations. More marinas are going to be stuck with boats they can't remove, and more damage is going to be done to an industry that's already struggling. So stay with me. This gets dark before it gets better. But you need to see this, because whether you're an owner, a potential buyer, or just someone who loves boats, this affects you. The ghost boat epidemic is a warning sign that we can't afford to ignore. Let me tell you what I'm seeing firsthand, because the scale of this is stunning once you start paying attention. I visited a mid-sized marina last month. Nothing fancy, just a typical community marina with about 200 slips. The dockmaster took me around and pointed out the problem boats. 18 boats in various stages of abandonment. Some had been sitting untouched for 6 months, others for over a year. One had been there for almost 2 years, with zero contact from the owner. These weren't derelict boats that looked abandoned. Most of them looked perfectly normal from a distance, clean enough that casual observers wouldn't notice anything wrong. But up close, the signs were obvious. Faded canvas covers, lines that hadn't been adjusted in months, accumulated dirt and debris, gear that had been sitting in the same position so long it left marks. And the paperwork trail, that's where it gets really disturbing. The marina had tried everything to reach these owners. Certified letters sent to addresses on file, phone calls to numbers that were disconnected or never answered, emails that bounced back, attempts to contact emergency contacts listed on the slip contract. Nothing worked. These owners had simply disappeared, and the boats were left behind like abandoned cars on the side of a highway. But here's what makes this different from typical boat neglect. These aren't all old boats owned by people who died or got sick and couldn't maintain them anymore. Many of these ghost boats are relatively new, well-equipped vessels that were clearly being used recently. The kind of boats that represent significant investments. You see electronics from the past few years, newish sails, recent upgrades. These were active boats owned by people who were engaged in boating. And then, suddenly, nothing. The owner just stopped coming, stopped responding, stopped paying, vanished. What happened to make someone walk away from that much invested capital and commitment? That's the question that haunts marina managers and industry professionals. Because the answer reveals something profoundly broken about the current state of boat ownership. Let me explain the economics that lead to abandonment, because once you understand the math, the behavior starts making terrible sense. Imagine you're a boat owner who bought during the pandemic boom. You paid $200,000 for a nice 40-foot sailboat. You financed most of it because rates were low and you had steady income. The monthly payment was $1,500, which felt manageable. Add in the slip fee of $800 a month, insurance of $200 a month, and general maintenance budget of $300 a month, and you're looking at total monthly costs of around $2,800. Not cheap, but you could handle it. You loved sailing. You had plans. It was worth it. Then things started changing. First, the initial excitement wore off, and you realized you weren't using the boat as much as you thought you would. Work got busy. Weekends filled up with other obligations. What you imagined would be every weekend on the water turned into once or twice a month, if you were lucky. But the costs didn't change. You were still paying $2,800 every single month, whether you used the boat or not. Then interest rates went up, and your adjustable rate loan adjusted higher. Suddenly, that $1,500 payment became $1,800. Your slip fees increased because the marina raised rates to cover their costs. Insurance renewed at a higher premium. Now you're at $3,200 a month, and you're using the boat even less because you're working more hours to cover the increased expenses. You start falling behind on maintenance because you're funneling all available money into the loan and slip fees just to keep the boat. Systems start breaking, things you'd normally fix right away get deferred. The boat starts needing more attention, but you have less time and less money to give it. And then you make a crucial decision. You check what your boat is worth now, thinking maybe you should sell and cut your losses. And you discover the market has collapsed. Your boat that you paid $200,000 for is now worth maybe $120,000 if you can even find a buyer. But you owe $170,000 on the loan still. You're underwater by $50,000. You can't sell without writing a check for $50,000 just to get out of the debt. You don't have $50,000. You're struggling to make the monthly payments as it is. Now you're trapped. You can't sell. You can't afford to keep paying. You can't refinance because the loan amount exceeds the boat's value. You start missing payments. First the slip fee, because you figure the marina can wait. Then the insurance, because it's not like you're using the boat anyway. Then the loan payment, because you literally don't have the money. The collections calls start. The stress is overwhelming. The boat that was supposed to be your dream, your escape, your joy, it's become a nightmare that's destroying your finances and your mental health. And at some point you make a decision. You just stop. You stop paying, stop answering calls, stop going to the boat, you abandon it. Not because you're a bad person or irresponsible, but because you've done the math and you've realized that continuing to fight this losing battle is going to bankrupt you. Walking away, as terrible as it is, actually minimizes your total losses. Your credit is already destroyed from the missed payments. The deficiency judgment from the loan, if it even happens, can't squeeze blood from a stone if you don't have assets to take. And the emotional relief of just being done with it, of not having this albatross around your neck anymore, it's worth more than the money at this point. That's how you get ghost boats. That's how valuable assets end up abandoned. Not because owners are negligent or uncaring, but because the financial trap they're in makes abandonment the least bad option. And the truly disturbing part is how many owners are in this exact situation right now. Thousands of them, all across the country, all doing the same math and coming to the same terrible conclusion. The ghost boats we're seeing in marinas are just the beginning. There are many more owners who are teetering on the edge, a few months away from abandonment themselves. They're still making payments, still showing up occasionally, still hoping somehow things will improve. But the trajectory is set. Unless something dramatic changes in the market or their personal situations, they're going to become the next wave of ghost boat owners. Now let me tell you what happens from the marina's perspective, because they're the ones left holding the bag. When an owner stops paying and stops responding, the marina can't just remove the boat. Maritime law is complex, and it varies by state, but generally marinas have to go through a lengthy legal process before they can take possession of an abandoned vessel. They have to document repeated attempts to contact the owner. They have to send certified notices. They have to file legal paperwork. They might have to get court orders. This process can take 6 months to 2 years, depending on jurisdiction and how backlogged the courts are. During all that time, the boat is occupying a slip that the marina could be renting to a paying customer. The marina is losing revenue, not just from the unpaid fees from the ghost boat, but from the opportunity cost of not having a paying boat in that slip. They're also liable for anything that happens with that boat. If it sinks and causes environmental damage, if it breaks loose and hits other boats, if it becomes a safety hazard, the marina could be held responsible. So they're motivated to resolve these situations quickly, but the legal system doesn't allow for quick resolutions. Eventually, after jumping through all the legal hoops, the marina can take possession of the boat through a process called a maritime lien. At that point, they own the boat, sort of. They own a deteriorated vessel that's been sitting untouched for possibly years, that has unknown mechanical issues, that may have environmental hazards, that needs significant work to even be movable. And their only recourse to recover their losses is to sell it. But here's the problem. The market is flooded with boats. No one wants to buy problem boats that have been abandoned and neglected. The marina might have $18,000 in unpaid slip fees and legal costs invested in this boat. They'll be lucky to sell it for $5,000. They take a massive loss on every ghost boat they have to process. And with multiple ghost boats in their marina, these losses add up to potentially 6-figure hits to their annual revenue. Some smaller marinas are being financially crippled by this epidemic. They can't absorb losses of this magnitude while also dealing with reduced demand and increased operating costs. This is pushing some marinas to the brink of insolvency themselves. And here's where it gets even more complicated. The lenders. Remember, most of these boats are financed. The owner might have abandoned the boat, but the lender still has a loan secured by that vessel as collateral, except now the collateral is worth far less than the loan balance, and it's deteriorating further every day. The lender wants to take possession and sell it to recover whatever they can. But the marina has a superior lien for the unpaid slip fees and storage. The marina gets paid first from any sale proceeds. Only after the marina's lien is satisfied does the lender get anything. So you have marinas and lenders fighting over boats that neither of them really wants, that are worth less than what's owed by multiple parties, and that are costing everyone money while the situation drags out. It's a financial and legal mess that benefits no one. The owner's credit is destroyed. The marina loses money, the lender loses money, and the boat deteriorates into something that might end up being worthless to everyone. This is what systemic collapse looks like from the inside. Let me tell you about the human cost of all this, because there are people suffering through this crisis. The owners who abandon boats, they're not doing it lightly. These are people who loved sailing, who had dreams, who made what they thought were sound financial decisions. And now they're facing financial ruin, credit destruction, legal threats, and the shame of having abandoned something they once cherished. Many of them are keeping this secret from friends and family because they're embarrassed. They're stressed, anxious, sometimes depressed about the situation. Some have told me they feel like they're walking away from a piece of their identity, a part of who they thought they were. The psychological toll is real and significant. Marina staff are suffering too. These are people who love boats and boating. They became marina managers or dock masters because they wanted to be around the water and help boat owners. Now they're spending their days trying to track down disappeared owners, dealing with legal paperwork, watching boats they used to admire slowly deteriorate into problems. They feel helpless. They're angry at owners who abandoned boats, but they also understand the desperation that led to it. They're frustrated with a system that makes resolving these situations so slow and expensive. And they're worried about the future of their marinas and their own jobs. The broader boating community suffers too. Ghost boats are depressing. They're visible reminders of failure, of broken dreams, of the dark side of boat ownership. They affect marina culture and atmosphere. People walking past these deteriorating vessels, they're not thinking about the joy of sailing. They're thinking about financial risk and owner regret. This affects how potential buyers view boat ownership. It reinforces every negative stereotype about boats being money pits and liabilities. It makes people more cautious, more hesitant, less likely to take the plunge into ownership. And that further weakens the market, which creates more owners underwater on their loans, which leads to more abandonment. The cycle reinforces itself. Ghost boats create conditions that lead to more ghost boats. Now let's talk about what happens to these boats long term, because their fate is often depressing. The boats that marinas eventually take possession of and sell, those are the lucky ones. They get bought, usually by bargain hunters willing to take on projects, and they get put back into service. Might take significant work, but at least the boat survives and has a second life. But many ghost boats don't end up that way. Some are in such poor condition after abandonment that they're not economically salvageable. The cost to repair and restore them exceeds their potential value. These boats end up being scrapped or dismantled for parts. A vessel that was worth $100,000 when the owner vanished ends up being worth $5,000 in scrap value. It's a tragedy in terms of wasted resources and wasted potential. Some ghost boats sink at the dock. Neglected through hulls fail, bilge pumps stop working, leaks develop. One day, marina staff comes in and finds the boat sitting lower in the water. Emergency pumping might save it, or it might not. Sunken boats at docks create huge problems. Environmental issues from fuel and oil leaks, potential damage to marina infrastructure, costly removal operations. And who pays for all of that? Usually the marina, because the owner is long gone and judgment-proof. Some ghost boats get auctioned off by marinas trying to recoup losses. These auctions are sad affairs. Beautiful boats that someone once loved, now being sold for pennies on the dollar to whoever will take them. Buyers at these auctions are often looking for the absolute cheapest entry point into boat ownership, which means they're sometimes not prepared for what they're taking on. So the cycle continues. The bargain buyer gets in over their head, abandons the boat again, and the marina is back to square one. There's also a growing issue of boats being moved to cheaper and cheaper locations to delay the inevitable. An owner who can't afford their current marina will move the boat to a cheaper one, then to an even cheaper one, then to a mooring instead of a slip, then to a storage yard on the hard. Each move is an attempt to reduce costs and buy time, but the underlying problem isn't solved. Eventually they run out of cheaper options and the abandonment happens wherever the boat ended up. This creates problems in new locations, spreading the ghost boat epidemic to facilities that weren't previously dealing with it. Let me tell you about the legal and ethical dimensions of all this, because they're complicated. Is abandoning a boat illegal? Sometimes, depending on the jurisdiction and how it's done. In some places, boat abandonment can result in criminal charges, usually misdemeanors. But prosecuting boat owners who've vanished is obviously difficult. And even if you could prosecute them, what's the point? They're already financially destroyed. A criminal conviction doesn't help the marina recover their losses or resolve the abandoned boat. Is abandoning a boat unethical? That's harder to answer than it seems. In an ideal world, owners would sell their boats properly, pay off their debts, and exit cleanly. But we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where market conditions can trap people in impossible financial situations through no real fault of their own. When your options are continued financial hemorrhaging that might destroy your entire financial future versus walking away and limiting the damage, is walking away really unethical? Different people will answer that differently. What's clear is that the system created conditions that make abandonment the rational choice for desperate people. The ethics of individual decisions matter less than the systemic failures that created this situation. And here's something that makes me particularly angry about all of this. The marine industry saw this coming. Not the specific manifestation of ghost boats, maybe, but the underlying problems that would lead to crisis. They saw the pandemic buying frenzy and knew it was unsustainable. They saw new buyers with no experience taking on boats they couldn't handle. They saw loans being written on overvalued boats. They saw the costs of ownership climbing while values were about to fall. Industry insiders knew that a reckoning was coming, but instead of pumping the brakes, instead of being more careful about who was buying and what they were buying, the industry pushed harder. They maximized short-term sales and profits, knowing that the long-term consequences would be devastating. And now we're living with those consequences. The ghost boats, the abandoned vessels, the owners in financial ruin, the struggling marinas, all of it was predictable and largely preventable if the industry had chosen long-term health over short-term profit. So what happens next? Where does this ghost boat epidemic go from here? Based on what I'm seeing and hearing, it's going to get worse before it gets better. We're still relatively early in this crisis. Most of the owners who bought during the peak are only now hitting the point where they've exhausted all options, and abandonment becomes the choice they make. Over the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to see a significant increase in ghost boats as more owners reach their breaking points. Marinas are going to be overwhelmed. The legal system is going to be backlogged with abandonment cases. The boats themselves are going to deteriorate further, creating more environmental and safety hazards. Some marinas won't survive this. They'll go bankrupt from the losses and be forced to close or sell. That will displace even more boats, creating more problems in new locations. The marine industry is going to face increasing pressure to do something about this. There will be calls for regulatory changes, for faster legal processes to deal with abandonment, for lender reforms, for industry responsibility. Some changes will happen, but slowly, too slowly, to prevent most of the damage we're going to see. Eventually, maybe 3 to 5 years from now, the market will find a new equilibrium. Boat values will stabilize at much lower levels. The boats that were going to be abandoned will have been abandoned and processed through the system. The owners who are going to fail will have failed and exited. What remains will be a smaller, more realistic boating market with fewer owners, lower values, and hopefully more sustainable economics. But getting from here to there is going to be painful. The transition period, which we're in right now, is going to claim more victims, create more ghost boats, and do more damage to the industry and the culture of boating. And I say this not to be alarmist, but because people need to understand what's coming. If you're a boat owner struggling financially, you need to know you're not alone, and you need to make smart decisions about your situation before you become another ghost boat statistic. If you're a potential buyer, you need to understand the risks and be realistic about whether you can sustain ownership long term. If you're in the marine industry, you need to be preparing for the continuing fallout and thinking about how to rebuild something sustainable from what's left. The ghost boats sitting in marinas right now aren't just abandoned vessels. They're warnings. They're evidence of a system that broke, of an industry that prioritized growth over sustainability, of individuals who were caught in financial traps they couldn't escape. Every ghost boat represents a human story of dreams deferred, financial stress, and difficult decisions made in desperate circumstances. And until we acknowledge that, until we deal with the systemic problems that created this epidemic, we're just going to see more boats abandoned, more owners vanishing, more damage to an industry and a lifestyle that many people love. This is the brutal reality of the ghost boat epidemic. Now you know what you're looking at when you see those neglected vessels sitting silently in their slips. Now you understand why the owners vanished, and now you can see where this is heading and what it means for everyone involved in recreational boating. The ghosts are real, and they're not going away anytime soon.